My role in the Vietnam War started on August, I think it was 14th, when the Gulf of Tonkin, because I was on an aircraft carrier at that time, and I was a communications officer, one of several, and I was on watch, and we were in Japan at the time, so that's when I was involved from that beginning. And the ship I was on, the USS Bonhomme Richard, CB-831, several weeks later was sent down to Yankee Station to start bombing in North Vietnam. And then spent 2 years on the carrier, 2 combat cruises, went over to Allied Forces Southern Europe in Italy, Naples, Italy for 2 years, a little over 2 years, and then was ordered to Special Warfare School, where I was to become a psychological warfare advisor to the Vietnamese 4th Coastal Zone. So I left in February of '68 and went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina for 2 months of training. At that time we were at the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare School, where they trained Green Berets, and psychological warfare was pretty much in its infancy, but bottom line is we were trying to win the hearts and minds of our adversaries, which in this case were the South Vietnamese and the villages that we thought at that point maybe had a choice. So our job was to learn how to psychologically induce them to be on our side. So it was more getting to know the people. In my case, being an advisor, I would be then going over working with the South Vietnamese Navy in the 4th Coastal Zone, and just letting them know that if they needed support from us on psychological operations, I would be able to provide it. What it ended up being is we would go to the villages with medical civic action programs, bringing doctors and dentists and corpsmen to the villages to help their children, their wives, families, and helping them live a better life. And of course the villages, and I was in the 4th Coastal Zone, 4 Corps, which was the Delta. So our job was, just to let them know that we weren't the bad guys. And through this, we did have the opportunity to gain intelligence. And although it wasn't our primary role in any way, shape, or form, however, it was very important, because what we learned through the villages, through the village chiefs, the village elders, even the young boys, young girls, young mothers, old women, they would tell us, you don't want to go there, you don't want to go there, you might not want to come back tomorrow. So it was, we learned a lot, but we also helped a lot. And at the same time, we would use psychological warfare during combat operations. We would be involved in land combat. For being a Navy guy, that was kind of new, but we would go in with the regional forces, popular forces, and while getting ready to combat, we'd going to it or coming from it, we would leave messages and have taped messages and telling them that we were the good guys, and if they came over, we had a Chu Hoi program, we would give them incentives to come to our side. And then we would do that with regional forces and popular forces, rough puffs we call them, and then we'd go up the river with the junk force, which were on the mouth of the rivers with the coastal group advisors, which were the Americans that were with the junk force at that time. So we were doing a lot of good, and I was very happy with that. And then a lot of stuff happened with the Swift boats. I got there in June of '68, and somewhere in the October-November time frame, we started what they called Sea Lords. And that was Operation Sea Lords, and it was done, our commanders in Saigon, because of some things that were done in the base that I was stationed at in Antoy. Some of our Swift drivers had gone into the rivers and made some pretty daring raids. So Sea Lord stands for Southeast Asia Land, Ocean, River, Delta Strategy. So they just brought all the boats from the coast, everything we had, and put them in the rivers. And that was for interdiction of supplies. Just let them know we're coming. At that time, I was assigned, I was advisor to the Vietnamese Navy, but I was assigned at that point as the advisor, PSYOPS advisor to Coastal Division 11, which was assigned out of Antwerp. So I was very familiar with them, to be honest with you, because they had provided a lot of transportation for myself, my counterpart, and our Vietnamese ambush teams and stuff like that. Because we were on an island, they would take us into the shore up at Ha Tien, which is on the Cambodian border, and then Rock Chow, which is, I had a chief petty officer who was also on my team. He was on over there. So they provided transportation and things like that, so I was familiar with it. When Sea Lord started and I was assigned, I spent an awful lot of time with them for a couple of reasons. Primarily because they were starting to do a lot of raids. They didn't need it, but we thought that when they were going into the river, we could stop at some of the villages and whatnot, and not only have a med-cap or a dental thing with them Americans instead of having Vietnamese with it. We could also bring support to them, and so they started using me. We kind of quit the loudspeaker program for obvious reasons and stuff like that. My counterpart, I found out, was a Vietnamese Navy lieutenant junior grade officer, and he was from the north. He was a North Vietnamese Catholic, and husband, 3 children, and he was a math teacher. So being a math teacher and being a Catholic, he certainly wasn't wanted in the North because the communists were not too happy with Catholics and certainly didn't like intelligentsia, the intellectuals. So he was able to get his family and come south. He'd been there quite some time before I got there, probably 10 years or something like that, I would guess. He came down in the early 60s, so it's 8 years. And so I met him and met his people and everything, and so we started to develop a relationship. He spoke English very well. I spoke phrases, and so we got along well. The one story that I tell about him is he was a loving father, a loving husband. He introduced me to his family. I ate with them. It was just, and I learned through that it was kind of my outing of being everybody is the same no matter where you are. And he was a good person to work with, and we had no problems, 0 problems, except for the one story I will tell is I was very aggressive from the standpoint that, hey, if I'm here, I'm going to do the best job I can. To do the best job I can means I had to be in motion. I had to be doing stuff, following the orders that would come down from Saigon and making sure we were out doing these operations, if you will. And we were always getting on junks and always going someplace. And we always had little ambush teams with us in case we got shot at and stuff like that. And we'd have little operations where we'd come under fire. And so this was going on, and finally one day my counterpart comes up and says, Dai Huy, which is Vietnamese for lieutenant, he says, you have to understand something. He says, you're going home in June. You're going home. You're 12 months here. I'm not going anywhere. The communists are going to stay. They will be here when you're gone. We don't have to do this every day, all the time. No, let's just settle down. So then we started having, and I have to say, probably more quality operations. So that was one thing about the Vietnamese and my job as an advisor, is that we did a lot of help, and we helped a lot of people.